No, those aren't fake numbers. That really is 378,607.9 miles. And yes, in this episode we're going to make this tired, worn out car pass California's smog, which I can tell you right now is no easy feat. For those of you who are not familiar with this car, it's a 1985 Toyota MR2 that we bought wrecked from a guy in Compton. Now, I've already done all the bodywork on the car, so it's looking good, but now we have to actually get it to pass smog and get registered. And of course, first, because we have to register it as a salvage car, it needs to pass something called a brake and lamp test, which is mandatory for any salvage title car in California.
This is actually one time where I'm gonna have to agree with Kirabo. I literally want to get rid of this thing and work on another car.
I don't know, man, like, just bear with me, alright? This is the last episode. I'm almost done with the engine, and then I guess we don't need to see this car again.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to keep it. That being said, the whole point of the show is that we got to get more cars, different cars.
It's true, but look, that's why this channel's kind of all split up. We've got the whole fun buying and selling kind of sods, and then we also have these more technical ones. I think there's a bit for everybody here, something for everyone, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
So we have a very interesting situation here. The car actually passed the brake tests, because in California you need to have a brake and lamp test done if your car's been in an accident before you can re-register it as a salvage title. Anyway, it passed the brake test and it passed the lamp test, except, let me show you something around the front here. Something that we didn't actually know. It's got these fog lights on here, down here. And they're not stock, they're aftermarket. Somebody put those on. They're not supposed to be there, and so it failed because of those, which is annoying. And what's even more annoying is the shop that does the tests, they're just right around the corner. So I asked them, hey, can't we just take them off? They're like, by law, we're not allowed to take them off on the property. So I've got the tools, I could just take them off so I can pass the test. But they're like, no, you have to drive around the corner, go to a parking lot or something, which we have, some random parking lot, and you have to do it there. It's so stupid. And I even asked them, like, couldn't you guys just take them off? Because it literally takes 2 minutes, we'll pay you extra. Like, nope, against the law, you're not allowed to, you have to drive it out and do it yourself. So we're gonna do it, stupid petty garbage.
That's the law.
Now, to get to this point, we actually had to do a couple of things. Number one, you may remember the front suspension was damaged. Turns out it wasn't that bad. It was just a tow arm, which was very cheap. It was about $20, and it was very easy to install. I did need a specialized tool, however, but luckily, here in the States, you can go to Auto O'Reilly's and you can rent a tool. In fact, they let you take one for free. And as long as you return it in time, they don't charge you for it. So it's fantastic. It was just because it was so hard to reach into that hole in order to, get a hold of the nut to loosen this thing. So find the one out of all this crap. Find the one that fits. And then it's going to, basically fit into the end of this thing like that. Put it on first, obviously, and then you've got this. And I couldn't do it with normal tools. There was no space, so we needed this tool. But like I said, just rented it. Super easy. Just loosen it, pull it off, put the new one on, make sure it's properly tightened, and away you go. So that sorted out the suspension. And don't worry, I checked all the bushings and everything else, and it wasn't loose. Nothing else was actually damaged. So what had happened is, obviously, the car had hit the wheel when the guy was turning to the left, and it had just basically bent the wheel back and bent that tow arm, and luckily not damaged the steering components or anything like that. So we got away with that one very luckily. Always getting stuff in my eyes.
Yeah.
Wear eye protection. Okay, I'm just going to try to pull it from that side. Need that WD-40 we bought. Next, and actually a bit of a bigger job, believe it or not, was the parking brake, or handbrake, or e-brake, or whatever you call it. The cables were actually missing. Although the car has close to 400,000 miles on the clock, this is actually a changed out engine. That's one of the reasons we bought the car, is that it has an updated JDM, which means Japanese Domestic Market engine. And this engine actually puts out a little bit more horsepower. It's a little bit more rigid. It's basically a stronger engine. But this one apparently had about 50,000 miles on it. So when they changed the engine out, I suspect that they removed the handbrake or e-brake cables in order to make the process easier and just didn't bother reinstalling them afterwards. This is also a big worry for everything to do with SMOG, but we'll get back to that later when we get back into the actual engine stuff. So in order for me to install these cables, I had to remove all these plastic cowlings, I guess, or protectors from underneath the car. Obviously trace where they're supposed to go, find all the mounting posts, and luckily for me, all the hardware in the front of the car anyway was still there. So although it was a very time-consuming job, it was actually very simple, just a matter of hooking up the new cables and then of course connecting them to the rear brakes. With brake and lamp certificate in hand, it was time for us to go and take the car in for SMOG. Now, Toyota has a reputation of just being incredibly reliable and, just they make fantastic engines, which is true, it's well deserved. So we were actually very expectant that it would pass. So, well, let's see what happened. Let's hope it passes. We'll see.
I give it a 60% chance.
And it failed. Turns out there wasn't a catalytic converter on the car, so we got one from O'Reilly, slapped it on, and came back for another free test, because they give you a free reinspection, which of course, it failed again. We're back with the MR2, and this is now going to be the third test. Yeah, it's the third.
Third, okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I still failed.
グレタ・トゥーンバーグに伝えます。
Well, to be honest, when I saw those numbers, I'll have to agree with them on this point as well, because when it's designated a gross polluter, a 1.6 liter Japanese 4-cylinder, then you know something is severely wrong with it.
I've got to be honest, I'm a little curious as to how the previous owner got this thing to pass SMOG. So what is it, the fourth time now?
This is getting boring and frustrating, and I don't think anyone wants to see this, but if we miss passing, it'll suck. We got it from her.
Yeah, so fourth time lucky, fourth time's a charm.
That's what they say, right?
It's like the luckiest number in China, number 4. Not.
4 times now.
So can you believe it?
We passed. We actually passed. I gotta see these numbers.
Yeah. How close was it?
Cleaned up pretty good.
Oh man, awesome. You have no idea how much effort has been going into that piece of turd. I'm super happy about it.
Yes.
So why was it failing so much, and how is it that I actually got this car to pass SMOG? Well, at first it seemed like it was just a missing catalytic converter, which, wasn't too expensive to buy one at O'Reilly's and get installed at a shop. I think it was a flat rate of $100 to get it installed and welded on. And we thought that would fix the problem, but unfortunately, when they did this engine swap, they messed a lot of things up. They didn't install a lot of things, or they just, basically buggered it up. I have no idea how they smogged this thing before. They must have paid a bribe or something, because there's no way that this thing was California legal. Anyway, when you're going to do something like this, my suggestion to you is to first start out by cleaning everything. Now, bear with me here. This engine was filthy. This engine bay, like I said, looked like a black hole of death. So a bunch of Crud Cutter and, just wiping it down and cleaning it down was the start. Now, while I was doing this, I was checking all the vacuum hoses, all the fuel lines, all the rubber hoses basically, to see if any of them were damaged, and the ones that looked damaged I would replace, because it's very cheap to buy yourself a bunch of this stuff at O'Reilly's. And also, while cleaning everything, it's a good idea to just go ahead and replace your spark plugs anyway, since you're going to be taking everything kind of apart here to clean it all up. And it's also going to increase the resale value of the car if you can make the engine bay look better. And the easiest and quickest way to do this, of course, is to clean up the valve covers. Now, it seems like it's a big job, and a lot of people are very scared of opening a motor up. But just remember that by removing valve covers, it's not a big deal. The only thing you need to make sure of is that you have new gaskets, and of course that you know how to tighten it down without over-tightening it. Now this car actually had an oil leak coming from the valve covers. You know, I could see there was a lot of oil just running down the sides of the engine and stuff. So I decided I would take these valve covers off anyway, and that way I could take a look inside, see if there was anything wrong with the valves or the cams, and take a quick look at the sort of timing belt and whatnot. So all it took were a couple of nuts off the top of the engine. Obviously, I first had to remove the throttle cable assembly and all that, but it's fairly straightforward. Remember, if you're confused, just take pictures, or like I did, take video, so that you know where everything goes when you're done. So, you know, once you've taken everything off, just make sure you know where to put it back. So I just removed the valve covers, and of course they had been painted before very badly with, I don't know what kind of paint. It looked like house paint or something. But there's a quick solution to this, and that is, of course, a wire wheel, my trusty wire wheel. And I just sat there and brushed all the paint off, made it as clean as possible. And then when it was all nice and clean, I wiped it down with some, you know, wax and grease remover, some Crud Cutter, made sure that basically there was no oil left on it, because you can't paint on top of oil, obviously. And then I just sprayed it with some high temperature paint, which you can buy at any auto parts store and even hardware stores. You get things like engine paint or caliper paint, and it doesn't really matter as long as it's a high temperature paint that can withstand fairly high heat. Remember, valve covers actually don't get that hot. It's not your exhaust or anything, but use a high temperature paint because you don't want the chance of this stuff burning off or, at worst case scenario, catching fire. And now it's pretty straightforward. Just put everything back on the way you took it off. Just don't over tighten the nuts or the bolts on the valve covers, because if you tighten them too tight, you can compress the gaskets and create an oil leak. So just kind of tighten it down till it feels right. Okay, so the fact that this thing is a lot cleaner now makes it so much easier for us to diagnose problems, because having said before, it's a Toyota engine. You don't expect it to really give you much trouble. But after replacing that catalytic converter that was missing, we honestly expected it would pass, but guess what? It didn't. So what do you do to figure out what's going on next? Well, when it comes to SMOG, the next thing you have to check if you don't have a catalytic converter, or let's just say your catalytic converter is old and tired, it needs to get changed, which does happen. The next thing to check is something called the EGR valve. And this is it right here. Most cars have something like this. Okay, and how this works is it's connected directly to the exhaust manifold out there. You can actually see by this pipe. And what happens is it basically, under certain circumstances, will open up and allow the exhaust fumes to get sucked back into your intake and get burned up by the engine. So basically it's taking some of the bad fumes from your exhaust, pushing it through the engine again so it burns up, so you have a cleaner exhaust. Of course, I don't like these things because they, you know, end up putting a lot of crap back into your engine and what have you, but whatever, it's the law, so you need them. Now, how they work usually is they use a vacuum. You can see this line here. This is a vacuum line, and it goes to this weird little thing here. It looks like a UFO. And this has also got a bunch of weird vacuum lines coming out. What the heck's going on here, you might be wondering. Well, guess what? So was I, because it's the first time I've ever had to replace or fix anything like this. Now, the EGR valve itself, you first have to check if that works or not. It's very simple. You disconnect over here, this vacuum line, and you can just take your mouth, stick it over you, and suck on it really hard. I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I got to somehow reach all the way down here and suck on this. And let's try to listen real close. So, suck on it, right? And must look like a real idiot right now, but anyway, take a look. You can clearly hear it opening and closing, so we know that the EGR valve itself is okay. If you try to suck on it and you're actually sucking in like a really gross tasting air, you know it's busted. Anyway, so we know that's fine. So what could be wrong next? Well, how does the EGR valve know when to open? Well, on these old Toyota engines anyway, they use this thing. It's called a back pressure transducer. Very fancy sounding name for a piece of crap that basically allows the vacuum to either, you know, operate or not. Here's the original one. Okay, and this thing was broken. You can test it in a similar fashion by basically blocking these things off and sucking on it. And it's not supposed to let air through because it has a diaphragm inside. This one it was broken. Now, what saved my bacon was this sticker here. It's incredibly faded and very difficult to see what's going on there. But this sticker basically shows you all of the routing for the vacuum lines. See, it shows you the EGR valve there. It shows you the what it calls the EGR VM, which is that back pressure transducer. And it shows you where everything goes. It's very complicated. Look for a sticker like this. If you can't find it, look online. Super important. So what I managed to figure out was that you have these 4 vacuum lines coming out of your intake manifold here. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 4. They go down here and they connect to some hard lines, which you can see some of them here. Some of them currently have nothing on them because it turns out that they're blocked and they don't work anymore, which was really not helping. So what I did was I traced that, using that diagram, I traced where all these things were supposed to go, and I basically made sure that every hose was connecting up to everything that it's supposed to, okay? It also connects up to some other crap back here and connects down here to this solenoid here, which opens and closes and allows vacuum or doesn't allow vacuum. And the most annoying thing is it's supposed to have a vacuum line that goes into the air filter because there's supposed to be a big air box here. And so it obviously, this big tube you're seeing here, it would have been connected to the air box. And that obviously has something to do with the whole evaporation system and the whole SMOG system. And I was obviously at a bit of an impasse because the original air box no longer existed. So what I had to do was, they'd put this cold air intake nonsense. Most boy racers do this to their cars. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. And I just replaced it with a newer one because the other one was completely knackered. And then I made a modification. I drilled a hole so that I could get one of these hoses into this kind of adapter over here. So I kind of made it all back to the way it's supposed to be. I made sure that all of these vacuum lines are connected where they're supposed to be. There's also one down here, you can see where it's connected into part of the cooling system there. So obviously it works off heat. So if it gets to a certain heat, it opens up vacuum for whatever reason. And I replaced this. Now this was tough because these no longer exist. I mean, when I say these, I mean these. They don't make them anymore for this model. And you know, you got a model number on here. I looked it up online and found 1 or 2 old secondhand ones, but why bother? I basically just went ahead and I found something from a newer Toyota of a similar sized engine. This is from a 1.8 litre Corolla or something. And obviously this is from a 1.6 litre MR2. And guess what? It works, and it works just fine, because after I replaced this, replaced all of the vacuum lines, put them where they're supposed to go, modified this cold air intake piece of crap to basically restore it to the way everything looks on this vacuum hose information sticker. Man, I wish that wasn't so faded so you could see what I'm talking about. I'll try and find one online to put it up so you can see what I'm talking about here. We took it in and it passed SMOG. So, I mean, the only other thing that I ended up doing was, of course, replacing the water bottle, the expansion for the radiator. And let me know in the comments. I mean, that's pretty boring. I just bought a universal one and swapped it out. If you really want to see how that all works, let me know in the comments and I'll make a specific video about that. But to be honest, that's pretty much it for this car.
あなたは熟練しています。
Well, thank you, Kirobo. You know, this is stuff we have to learn as we go along. I've never had to do this much work on smog and emissions because I'll be honest with you, in South Africa, we don't even have a smog test. At least we didn't when I was there. We have to do a roadworthy test, which is pretty intense. They check like the tire tread and they go underneath the car. They make sure everything's like legit and you can't have oil leaks and stuff like that. So,
well, the audience will know if you don't come from California, if you're from a different state, all states have wildly different laws.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, in my home state of New York, we wouldn't have had to do anything to this car.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty well, it's a very annoying thing about living in California, but at the same time, I'm also very surprised that they don't check things like tires. Because, like, we've got one bald tire on this car, and, you know, like, the suspension was all whacked and all that. You know, they didn't check to see if it was okay. It's just literally brake and lamp test is what we had to do to get a salvage title. Take it in for SMOG. They did the test finally when it passed after the 4th time. And then we could get it registered. Yeah, you know.
So it wasn't that bad after everything was said and done. Emissions is the worst.
It is. It totally is. And I get it. I mean,
I get it.
If you're in California, it's blue skies all the time. There's a reason for that, right? It's beautiful weather. But yeah, that was really tough. Anyway, man, this is the end of this particular car. I want to ask you if it's okay for us to give a little bit of a sneak peek at our upcoming car.
All right, I'll chuck something in there for you guys.
Okay, excellent, because we do have another one, and can't wait to see you, because the next episode you see on Worthless Whips will be another full-on buy, fix, sell,
and
challenge.
Not to spoil anything, but it's wildly different from this car.
Very, very different. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching Worthless Whips. We hope you're enjoying this as much as we are making it. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.
あなたたちはバカです。
You would have thought that we had learned our lesson not to buy cars in places like Compton, so we picked a different neighborhood in LA, and unfortunately, it was just as bad.
Where are you from, man?
Originally Nigeria.
Oh yeah, I'm originally from South Africa.
South Africa?
Yeah.
Oh. Why are your people killing everybody?
Thank you to everybody on patreon.com/worthlesswhips that's been supporting the channel. Not only did you guys get access to all the behind the scenes content, a chance to talk to us directly, but also, most importantly, you guys voted on the next car that we already got. So we are super pleased to announce that you guys voted and we got the car that you chose. Stay tuned also, because on patreon.com/worthlesswhips, you'll get a chance to win one of the cars that we're actually gonna do up.
Hey Vivi, what do you think about this new piece of crap we bought over?
First of all, why you guys keep buying junk?
All right, Dr. Milk, we have a new vehicle in the shop. So I mean, now I could literally stand inside the engine bay,
Right.
you know, and get to work, which is something I find incredibly cool.
I hope they don't care about this ectoplasm coming out of the car.
Stuffy as fuck.
If you guys enjoy the show, consider getting some merch. We have a very limited time only t-shirt. It's only up for 8 more days as of posting this video. If you go to everpress.com/worthless-whips, you can check out our t-shirt. It's black. It comes in all the way down to extra small, all the way up to 2XL. These are European sizes, so they're not, you know, from Asia where you get 3 sizes too small. We think they look super cool. We had a subscriber actually design it in classic PlayStation 1 graphics. We think it's awesome, and we hope you guys like it too.